Go ahead, Darren. This is the SharePoint user group meeting for November for the SharePoint user group of DC, and we have Darren Hemming with us to talk about Teams and SharePoint integration.
Thank you, Scott. So the idea of this session is to take a look at SharePoint and Teams together. There's a lot of talk about, oh, well, we don't need SharePoint anymore because we've got Teams. And then some people saying we don't need Teams because we've got SharePoint and it's working. I think that the premise of my talk here really is to show that actually the two things work really well together, inside each other and next to each other. And also in the end, you know, Teams is just SharePoint with some other stuff in front of it. So maybe understanding that could help. We'll talk about communication and collaboration because they are two verbs which are almost identical and quite often used interchangeably. But we'll look at the different ways that we can interpret those in terms of SharePoint and Teams. We'll look at what Teams looks like if you look at it from the SharePoint view, because that gives us some extra features. And then we'll do it the other way. We'll look at staying in Teams, but putting some SharePoint elements in those teams to bring the two things together. Perhaps not necessarily even leaving Teams to do your SharePoint stuff. Copying files as well, fairly straightforward. Copying around Teams is easy enough. But if you want to copy outside of a team into a SharePoint site, there are some extra steps to get involved in. Then finally, there's the idea of when you create your communication sites in SharePoint and you set permissions on those, maybe instead of building, you know, SharePoint groups or creating security groups in Azure, maybe you could just create your teams instead and then use those teams as the groups for those SharePoint permissions. So over here, you should be able to see some sites that I've made. So there's a couple of things here that I've thrown together for this talk. The idea is that there's a company and they've got obviously multiple departments. They've got developers and production, and we're just interested here in the sales people working in kind of the Washington area and nearby. And so we've created this sales hub, and then associated with that, there's actually a number of different teams. So I'm hoping I've got the names right here. My geography is not great, but you know, Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, places in the area, and each one of these places has its own sales team who can work together. So talking about communication versus collaboration, the idea of a communication site, which is what this is that it's a place where you can go to publish information to a wide audience of people. That's the important thing. It's a large number of people. It might be all staff in the company. It might be all the sales staff. It could be all the developers, all the production people, all the marketing folks. It's a large audience of people where most people are read only. They've only got read access to that content. And that's important because if you give too many people access to content, then they'll do bad things with it, like delete it. The more people you have that can access a large number of files or pages, the bigger the risk that somebody's going to mess something up. So that's part of your governance. And then the opposite of that, of course, is teams, where ideally you'd have a fairly small number of teams, each with a fairly small number of users inside them. And of course, everybody in a team is a member. So that means everybody in that team has ownership of the content, and they can delete the content and create new content and create channels and all the rest of it. But it's a small number of people compared to the large audience that you'd have with a collaboration, a communication site. So if you look at this site that we've built, it's got all the usual modern SharePoint stuff on, really large images. You don't have to have those at the top, but that is the modern web. News items, rolling up content, either news items from this site or of course pulling things from other sites which are connected as well. And you've got your documents in SharePoint. So here we're just surfacing a single document library. You could drop into the whole library if you wanted to do some stuff in more detail. Events, things like then the hero web part, just adding a really compelling visual way to connect to content. It's all about the visuals, really, the communication sites. The more I build them, the more pictures we stick into them, because it draws people in. It's a reason for people to come back, especially if you can keep those news items current as well. The other thing about the news items, you don't necessarily have to create your own articles, because it takes quite a while to create a page, put some text on it, pictures, videos. So what I like to do is just steal content from the internet, go to a web page that I like, and then just add that as a news link, and it's much, much faster. So that's the concept of a communication site. And again, it's that wide audience. And then comparing that with the teams. So here what I've done is I've created a team for each of the sales teams. So the way that Teams works, of course, you can have multiple channels. You can just create new channels within that space. Sometimes that channel is a private channel. So, for example, here is a channel just for the sales managers. So that's just for one person, really. They're probably going to be the owner of that team as well. But this is a space where that one person can store their own stuff within a team without it being in their OneDrive. And, this is where they keep their secrets. Who am I going to sack? Who's going to get a pay rise? Those kind of things that nobody else sees in that team, but also creating other channels. So, of course, you use Teams for collaboration, and that can mean a lot of different things. It can just mean posting news and having conversations and dialogues and arguments with people about things within these spaces. But it can also mean document collaboration. So, you get inside a folder, you get inside a document, you open that document and you start to co-author that document. Bit of Latin, of course. And that's the difference really between the communication and the collaboration. Communication, there's a very small number of people that edit the content. Collaboration within a team, everybody can edit that content as well. So it's a completely different way of working in that space. So looking at the SharePoint view of a team, most of the time you can probably stay in the Teams interface. If you find a document and you select that document, there's a lot of things you can do. You can open it, you can edit it, get a link to it, pin it, make it a tab, and clicking in there, you can do the normal stuff, renaming, moving, copying. Quite limited in some ways, though, because if you copy, you can obviously copy inside the team itself, and you can go up and you can find your other teams as well. But what you can't do with this is copy between that team and a SharePoint site, which isn't a team. So what I would do in that case is I would drop into the Files tab to begin with, open it in SharePoint. So it's still exactly the same place. It's colored a bit different and a little bit prettier. And of course, the search is much better. But then find that document, do your copy to, but this time you can actually copy to SharePoint sites as well, including documents, including folders inside that Sales Hub site, the communication site that we made. So that's sent a copy into there now. I think I put it in legal. There we are. That's coming across there. If you've got access to it, of course, because remember, most people won't have access to these hub sites. And there's a few more things you can do inside a team as well. You get to play with the version history if you're using the SharePoint view of it, so you can recover documents that were once messed up. You can set alerts just to see if anything changes on that document. And of course, you can still do your classic check-in, check-out if you really want to force a new major version of a document when it gets changed. So that's the reasons for switching into the SharePoint view of a team. What I think is going to happen is that over time, the Teams files interface is going to get better and better. It's going to get more and more like SharePoint. And I think in the end, you won't need to open in SharePoint because Teams basically has become SharePoint in terms of files and document management. We've already got things like the file sync that wasn't there before. We've already got the ability to use different views inside Teams. So I think the rest of it's going to come as well. So the other thing we're going to look at is embedding SharePoint items inside the team. So I've got a couple of examples here within the Maryland Sales Hub, within the Maryland Sales Team. We've got a link through to the Sales Hub. So this is literally this website. I'll just take you back to the home page. That's literally this website showing up in Teams. It's all there. You can get to all of it. You can even expand it so it really just takes over the whole of Teams. So you don't even need a browser anymore. That's quite an interesting idea. A lot of people now are using Teams. It's the main way that they do things. They're using email less. And the ability to actually stay in Teams but still consume a SharePoint service for communication is quite powerful. And of course, you can also just open that in a new page, a new tab completely. So you actually get the whole site pop up in a new tab. For just those one or two things that you can't do if you're trying to edit it in the frame inside Teams. The other thing you can do is you can get documents. So this is actually a document library from over here. So when we look in documents in the Sales Hub, that is literally the same place. So just to show you how to do those two things, to get the page in, find the plus button, add SharePoint Pages as an app, because everything's an app. Add a page from any SharePoint site and just paste in the URL, and that literally will add it in. And a similar thing for the documents. Click on the plus, go to Document Library. It will give you some good examples, or you can use, again, a SharePoint link, paste it in and go, and that will add it in to that space as well. There's one more thing that might be useful is within the Files tab. I don't know if you noticed, but I've got this special folder here that's got the little linky symbol on it. Washington Sales Hub documents. And again, it's that same document library as we've seen before. And this is what's called cloud storage. So literally, you come into the Files tab, you add your cloud storage, and you add SharePoint. You've got some other options, but you don't need any of those because SharePoint will do it for you. And again, you choose the the library you want to surface and work through your way through the wizard, and then that gets added like this. So one more thing to show you is this idea that when you build these, normally what you might do with this site is either you would create SharePoint groups, or you'd use the existing SharePoint groups of members, visitors, owners, and you'd put your users into there loose. But that's a lot of kind of individual users getting added in. If you've got hundreds or thousands of people that need to have access to this site, that's not a great way of doing it. So what you might do instead is create a security group. It might be a mail-enabled security group. It might be just a security group on its own that isn't mail-enabled. It just can't be a distribution list. And you might create that and maintain that within either your local Active Directory and let that sync up into Azure using AAD Connect, or you might create that group directly in Azure. Nothing wrong with that, still a very good way to do things. But the more people start using Teams, the more you realize that you're actually creating two sets of groups that have identical memberships. So you might have some kind of senior managers team that is a team, and you have to put the managers into that as members. And you also have maybe a male-enabled security group that is exactly the same and has the same people in. So the idea of this really is to reduce the burden on managing this kind of thing. So if I show you the site permissions for this site, go into advanced permissions, because that gives you much more options. And you can see these memberships, these permissions are very, very simple. It's literally all the teams that I showed you, Delaware, Maryland, all the sales teams with the word member at the end. And the reason that works is that when you create a team, behind that team, you're actually creating an Office 365 group, or what they used to call a unified group, because the idea is it was supposed to be a unified experience, in Outlook, and it's got a mailbox and it's got a SharePoint site behind it. So that still happens, and each of these has that group behind it. So if I show you some that I made earlier over here, these are literally just groups with teams, and you can see all the teams in place. And as I say, these are actually security. Well, they're not security groups. They are Office 365 unified groups. But in SharePoint, you can use them to give permissions just like a security group. So the idea is you don't need to take two groups into the shower with you anymore. You can just take one group and only manage one group. There are some limitations to that, because you might need to have distribution lists for particular purposes as well. And maybe you need to have local AD groups for things like group policies. So you can't always do this, but it's quite a neat way of unifying the experience. And that is pretty much all I wanted to show you today. Do you guys have any questions?
Do you know if there's a way, like, I know you have to have access to the admin center to see that Teams with Groups view.
Yep.
But is there a way if you're not in the admin center, say?
So you've got different roles within Office 365 that can be brokered. So to make somebody a global admin is a big deal. You shouldn't have more than one or two global admins. There is a role called Teams system admin, so you can basically be a team, and that would allow you to see the membership of the teams, which would allow you to see a similar kind of thing. You could also persuade people to make you a SharePoint admin. So you're not a global admin, and you're not even a Teams admin. But if you persuade them to make you a SharePoint admin, so you've got access to this, then when you go into sites, you can see your active sites in there. And there are various filters you can do in there as well. But essentially, if I went in here and I go sales, I'm going to find those same teams, those same groups. And I know they're connected to Teams rather than SharePoint communication sites, because the template is always team site. Would that help? Are you allowed to be a SharePoint admin?
No, I'm not in the actual IT department, but I know people who are, and I can get through it that way.
I suppose the question is, what's the requirement? Are you only interested in your teams? The teams that you're in already?
No. So right now I'm working as the SharePoint support for 600 people in the organization of 18,000, and trying to get them corralled as we move forward with all of this Microsoft 365. And making team sites, but also making communication sites, and then being able to pull in the permissions for the communication sites from the teams that are already going to get created.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what you could do is you could do just the whole thing from a SharePoint site, because when you go into, I'll come in the full way. When you come into a SharePoint site that you've made, so you can make SharePoint sites. So that's something that you're allowed to do in your organization. Anybody can just create a site like that.
Well, anybody can create a team right now.
Yep.
The sites, making a comm site, no, but I'm working on that.
Okay, because that's a different setting in there. Within SharePoint, being able to, it's one of the settings in there somewhere. So yeah, you can go in there and you can control who can actually create SharePoint sites, and who basically gets this button over here, this create site button. And that is a different thing from creating teams, because to create a team, the basic access that you need, the permission you need, is to be able to create Office 365 groups. And if you can create Office 365 groups, you can create teams. But if you've been blocked from creating Office 365 groups, that doesn't necessarily prevent you from creating communication sites. That's just a SharePoint setting. But what I was going to show you is, once you're in here, you can just have a look at permissions in that site. Always go to advanced permissions because it's better.
Yeah. I don't think you're sharing your screen, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Reshare.
Let me reshare. There we go. Yeah, so basically I was here. Down in site permissions, advanced permissions. And then you can pretend that you're going to do a grant permissions. And then basically this is a little search box that lets you search for things. And if there is a group called Maryland Sales, or Mary Jackson, that's where you'll find it. So you have to have a bit of a clue. You have to know the basic name of the group you're searching for to see if it exists. But you can then actually find it in here just by doing this kind of search. And of course, if it's the one you want, then you go ahead and you probably don't do that, but you probably just give them access. And of course, it would be read access. And that's basically how I created the other ones there. Would that help you? I know it's not like an overview in the sense that a Teams admin or global admin would get. But if you already have a clue, if you already know some of the keywords that you're looking for when you're searching to see if a team already exists that you can use, then you can find it in here.
Yes, I'm getting them to, I'm going to be I'm going to be part of the groups that can create groups, because I'm going to make the teams for my 600. Cool. So I'll have my names. I'll be good.
That's great.
And as long as I can still search there and I can still pull them in that way, that'll work.
That's great. That's literally all I've done today. Is I've gone in. I didn't create these teams through Teams admin. I just went into Teams and I just went join and create a team, and made the team. This I did create through the admin, but I could equally have just hit this create site button.
So Joe, can you tell me, do they have any kind of governance at all as far as what you're naming these groups or teams?
They just came out with an idea for a naming convention. Yes,
they did that after 6 months of letting people do it.
Yes, you know the people involved.
I know. It's just because a lot of these things are impossible to change after they've been created. And so I'm wondering how many people are going to be like, oh, well, we've just reorganized and now we need to rename it. And so you have the option of leaving the old name or migrating everything to a new site, a new team.
Yeah, it was actually, sometimes the problem's too big to see. So when the 3,000 teams were created within weeks, the SharePoint admins couldn't even tell, because the global admins had done some things wrong. But when I was able to show them my that my 600 had created 172 teams, and just that I could, just by doing a poll real quick, they were like, wait a minute, what's happening now? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So, and all the various names that they had all come up with. And yes, naming conventions got pushed to the head of the line.
So there are some things you can do. I mean, one is obviously just with governance and asking people to name things in a certain way. It's never a problem to retitle a team, by the way. You can always do that. You can edit the team and you can just change its name. You can't change the underlying URL of the team. So if I take our Maryland team and I drop into SharePoint mode, you'll see that the URL is sites Maryland sales team. That can never be changed. I know there are ways and means. I'm never going to do that. I don't think it's robust. But you can change the title all day long. If we wanted to make all these teams be called bananas, we could do that just in the interface very quickly, and it wouldn't cause any problems for anything. So in some ways, it doesn't matter about the naming because you can change it afterwards. But obviously, it would make it really much easier for the admins, the SharePoint admins, the Teams admins, the global admins who are managing this kind of thing. It would make it a lot easier if they were sensibly named. There are some rules that you can ask your IT folks to add in so that certain prefixes are always added to the titles of a team. So at least if somebody then came into the SharePoint admin center and they looked at a load of here it is, they looked at a load of sites, they'd be able to see really quickly which ones were teams, because it might just have the word teams in front of it, or T- or something. Although I'd rather put one at the end, I think, if you're going to do that. But to be honest, it's quite clear when something's a team in here, because you can see this. The other thing is, the reason I come in here quite a lot, the Teams Admin Center doesn't have an export button. You can't go in and get a big list that comes out and kick it into SharePoint. Whereas if you come in through SharePoint, you can. It generates a lovely CSV file with the URL, and it tells you the template type, so you know if it's a team site or a communication site. And that's a very, very useful thing to have. And of course, the other way to hit this is with something like PowerShell. You can write some fairly simple PowerShell scripts that will do that sort of thing for you as well. Any other questions, guys? What do you think about the idea of mixing up, the communication sites with the teams? Is it helpful? Is it confusing? Thinking about your end users.
Oh no, it's absolutely big. Yeah, it's what I was thinking, trying to design the information architecture. Teams is only half of it.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's the collaboration spot. That's where you work. That's the files. That's the talk in the office. That's your work center.
Yeah.
Where's the other half?
Organizationally, we've just made division sites, all communication sites, all new ones anyway, and then all lower level organizations get team sites, and the division then has the hub enabled so that it can have all the subordinate offices connect up and do roll-ups and stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah, hubs are getting more and more interesting. This has moved on. I just threw some extra links here just to show off really those sites that I made, like the Maryland sales team there. You can add that as a link from the Sales Hub just by editing. And what's cool, this is a relatively new thing they've added, because you could always add a link, but it was never security trimmed, which was a problem for me, because if I added links to Maryland sales team and New Jersey sales team, the Maryland sales team would have seen a link to the Maryland team, which is fine, but they would also have seen the New Jersey link and the Delaware link. And when they clicked on it, that would have given them a broken link, an access denied. But they fixed this now using audience targeting. So it's not quite the kind of automated natural security trimming that we might have hoped for, but I think it still works, because what you can now do is you can add that link. And then once you've added it, you can use an audience, and the audience I've used for this is literally the name of the team with the word members at the end. So for me, that makes hub sites usable now in terms of navigation in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of people need to put a lot of extra thought into these things. Like every single setting that can be flipped one way or another needs to be a conscious decision. Mm-hmm. And you have to have these in your head, or preferably on paper, before you start building anything.
Yeah, absolutely. You need a really, really big piece of paper, some strong coffee, and an aspirin. Because the temptation is, especially, you know, when Microsoft give you a big button that says create site, it's so tempting just to go in and make some sites, you know, and Teams. Oh, look, I can make a team, brilliant. And you get carried away with creating, as you described with your 600 users. I perish to think what the other 18,000 users had done in Teams. And you really need to slow the process down in some ways. But it's difficult because you want to apply some governance to it. You want to control the flow. You want to make sure it happens in a sensible way. But at the same time, you don't want to kill the enthusiasm, you know? If there's people turning up and going, oh, yeah, I love SharePoint. Look, I can make my own sites. And this team thing is brilliant. I could just spin up a site, you know? So we don't want to lose that. And it's almost kind of a balancing act between the two. And that to me is kind of the definition of the word governance. You know, you tell people what they should be doing, what they can do. You put certain limits in place. You might put things like workflows in place or approval processes. So if somebody wants a new team or somebody wants a new SharePoint site created, maybe rather than them just doing it, perhaps you ask them to fill a form in, you know, put together a Microsoft form. That form gets routed through to an email address or a SharePoint list or something. And then somebody else will just have a quick look at it and go, yeah, that seems sensible. And create it for them. What kind of processes do you guys have in place for that? I know from what we've heard, some of you just have the ability to go in and create teams, and almost anybody can create teams. Have you seen any good examples of kind of workflowing that, of getting people to approve?
We actually have that set up at my client's office right now, where there are different pathways depending on the type of site, team, etc. that you're looking for to get the approvals. If you're wanting an on-premises version of SharePoint versus the Office 365 version of SharePoint, they have different paths, and it all. There was at one time running all SharePoint permission groups, or I'm sorry, SharePoint designer workflows, and then we've recently converted that all over to use Power Automate. Cool. But it works fairly well, and we're still doing a whole lot of testing, just, you know, because everyone's like, oh, well, can it say this instead? And there's like a lot of minute changes. You know, the term I love for this is called bike shedding, and there's a lot of that going on, and so the little tweaks are getting made still. If you don't know the term bike shedding, it's that it's from a study a long time ago of people who were building nuclear reactors, and the people who knew the least technical understanding of building nuclear reactors would argue for most of the meeting on the color of the bike shed outside of the power plant.
Yes.
so that they could feel like they were contributing something to the development of the reactor. So that's all I'm saying is there's a lot of bike shedding now going on, with different stages of management saying, oh, can we change this verbiage? Can we add this little thing? But for the most part, the functionality is in place, and it appears to work pretty well most of the time. We've also got, and the way that it works as well is we have some custom code that runs off of an in-house server, and it, C#.NET kind of code, and Power Apps will run through this list to do all the approvals, and whenever it has finally gotten through all of the approval stages, the service looks through that list every 5-10 minutes, something like that, and it sees, does anything match, and if it does, it then generates the site. So it after approval, it might be 15 minutes, and then you've got the site, branding, and all those other things applied to it.
And that's quick enough, right? If this is a properly planned thing and it's a site that you really, really need, then 15 minutes is not too much to have to wait for that process. I think the other thing that is quite nice about Teams is that you can start to delegate. Because of course, if you're not using security groups anymore, which you can't in Teams really, you have to, just manage it through the membership of the team, and you've got a choice of who do I add as members and who do I add as an owner. I'm just keeping myself in there today. But you do have this idea now that if you make the head of department, for example, the head of a particular service, if you make them an owner of the team, they then have the ability to choose who's in their gang. It's not necessarily something that has to be done by IT anymore. So in some ways, that's more organic, it's quicker, and it allows people to feel in control in that bike shedding kind of way. And of course, there are other things they can do as well, like creating the channels. That's a bit of fun. They can come in with a bit of training, and they can, they can manage what's happening in the channels. They can go in the settings, and they can control some of the member permissions in there, so they can choose whether or not to delegate the ability to create channels to members and things like that. And of course, they can turn off the fun stuff, which they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's at least a couple of things in Teams that give you kind of a semblance of control over what's happening. SharePoint, I think that's probably the case as well if you're a designer. If you're just somebody who's kind of a reader, then you can't do anything. If you've got the contribute rights, the edit rights, you can't do so much other than create folders and create news items. Once you're a designer, though, you can do pretty much anything other than break the permissions, and that's quite nice. So the fact people can just come in here and say, I just want to drop in another section, have a nice 2-column section there. I'll color it in. I'll add some web parts. And there are some cool web parts now if you search for video.
Yeah.
Obviously, and that kind of stuff. And I think the fact that these sorts of things are available, let's discard that. I think the fact that these kind of things are available to specific people within those SharePoint sites. Again, there's the bike shedding. There's not too much they can do. They can edit the pages if they want to. They can break the theme and make it horrible. Actually, it's not too bad, but it is a little bit yellow jacket. And I think that might be enough. Plus all the usual stuff, like changing these logos here and things.
As long as the theme matches the colors of your football team of choice. Okay?
What do you do with themes? Do you create a company theme? Because what we do for our customers, obviously, is we ask them to choose a couple of colors, and then we weave those colors into the theme so that you end up with a swatch, like this one here, for example.
Right now, I think that we're still pre-vanilla. That hasn't been customized at all. We don't block other people from being able to make a change. What I've tried to get them to do, considering, we can't really do anything but give them dumb looks if they violate governance, is to stress, we're not making you do this because we can't, but we're going to inform you that you look like a moron if you do it. And no one wants to look stupid, so just listen up and follow along.
And if if stuff goes wrong, it's always helpful to play the data protection card, or GDPR as we have.
Well,
over here.
the one thing I love to throw out there is Section 508. So for disability and handicaps and stuff like that, it has, because no one really knows the ins and outs of that law, and I'm able to use it to say no to really dumb requests.
Yeah.
And so I love to throw Section 508 out there.
Yeah, my favorite, and it was more of a thing in classic SharePoint, but do you remember the promoted links icons?
Yeah, the squares.
And which we still use. We've got our own web part for it because it's still pretty. But one of the things that was around was, we want to fit more buttons on the page. We want to fit more tiles on the page. So people were writing JavaScript and CSS and all kinds of hacks to make those images shrink down. So everything got smaller. The text got smaller. The pictures got smaller. And just looking at that from kind of a special educational needs point of view makes it incredibly difficult. Visual impairment. It was an awful.
You really don't want anything moving on the site. And the other one, a lot of people love the damn carousels, like what you've got going on right now.
Yeah.
And I have to keep telling them, if you have more than 3 items in your carousel, it's stupid. Because no one is going to sit there long enough to wait for all of them to pass through and get whatever news that you're trying to pass them.
You're right. Yeah.
I always have to tell people, because they want a marquee. They're like, you know what? I want the marquee with that scrolling script going across the top of every single page, always. And it only takes, I've got a couple of demo ones of it. And I'm like, here, work on this page for more than 10 minutes.
They have to
come back and they'll
understand,
be
this
like,
isn't
okay, I
US
can't
cities.
even do this. Like, what's going on? And I was like, yep, a marquee is great if you're on the page for about 2 or 3 minutes. A carousel is great if you're on the page for about 2 or 3 minutes. If it's on your team site, no.
It's very distracting, isn't it? There's a conversation I'm in on Facebook at the moment about when a news item is created, can it do stuff? Can it send an alert? Can it send an email? Can it beep at you? Can it bing? And my kind of argument is, people should go to the news sites. They should come to these home pages, and they should use them because they want to use them, and because when they come there, they think, I see interesting things when I come here. There's interesting articles. There are good documents for me. I really don't like to see SharePoint pages mailed out often. Certainly not all of them. I think occasionally,
You can definitely get notification overload. And if you get too many notifications, and this has happened with alerts for as long as SharePoint's been around, people stop looking at those alerts, and they end up with hundreds and hundreds of unread email messages, because they'll click on the first one, work through the list of all of the things that have caused the alerts, and then they don't ever open up those other emails. And it gets annoying. People should focus on, let people decide what they want to pull for information, and then they can nominate themselves to be pushed information.
Yes.
And that way they're not overloaded with things that they do not find important.
Yeah, absolutely. People need to be able to choose what they see, and alerts is a great example of that. The fact that somebody can choose to watch a document library, but they can also choose, only to get that
As a
that
weekly
email
digest.
digest, once a week or once a day or whatever, but not that every time somebody changes a document, it goes ping, ping, ping in your mailbox.
Yeah, I saw a really great webinar yesterday from Joy of SharePoint and somebody talking about the reason behind all of the Microsoft stuff coming out about the modern collaboration architecture, or MoCA. And it's all about the neural load, right? It's the myth of multitasking. No one actually multitasks. Our brains don't work that way. It's just simply switching focus and email notifications and chat pop-ups and all the rest of it just drive people insane slowly, because the computers are fast enough now. The computers are taking care of a lot of things now. And the problem has become not the computers slow, or I have to go to 16 different places. Now it's all brought to my desktop. And the problem now is the scarce commodity, according to Satya Nadella, is human attention.
Yeah.
How can I get enough attention focused on my work to get my work done? And you have to, that's notifications management. That's not everything is an email. That's focus
they have
time.
To ban cat videos.
Yeah, ban cats. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the efficiency expert is his time is over. He won. Everything's super efficient now. Now let's work on effective.
So I've in my email, for it must be about 20 years now since I've had that setting where it pings at me. I try to do the thing where, first of all, my email never pings at me. And secondly, I try to only answer my emails or look at my emails once or twice a day. I've still got Outlook open, so it's there. I need to make sure nothing important's coming in. And quite often I'm waiting for a customer to get back to me. So I am actually looking to say, yes, we've started this interaction. Are they coming back to me so that I can move forward with my job? So it's kind of in some ways for my benefit, I suppose. But I think, of course, we've got these new threats now to our personal time management. Teams with pings, mobile phones. Quite often I'll switch myself into do not disturb on my machine if I'm doing something like this, but of course my phone's still there, and that's going to go ping, ping, ping. So you almost have to remember to turn off all these different devices.
Jenna, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to ask something?
Whoops. Yeah, actually, I kind of a slightly different question. And I was more related to just kind of maybe clarifying some vocabulary for me. You were talking earlier about your security-enabled permission groups or mail-enabled permission group, and that's different than an Outlook distribution list. So those three combined, plus Office 365 groups and Azure Active Directory groups, are those all like different names for the same thing? Or are those 5 different things?
So they're all groups of people that you can use to do things. A security group is a group of people that you have in Active Directory, and that might start off on perhaps a local Active Directory, your domain controller on premises. But then quite often those security groups will be synced up to Office 365 as well, but they'll be synced up to Azure AD.
So is that the same then as like it is an Office 365 group, you just don't have Teams turned on for that group, or is it completely separate? Like you can't add Teams to a security enabled permission group?
So you can't mix security groups with Teams, that's right. But you can take any Office 365 group and you can upscale it into a team. You can paint it purple and you can call it a team. Any Office 365 group. So, we were talking earlier about going into Outlook, and you can create a group, and that would just be an Office 365 group that kind of exists from the Exchange end, from the Outlook end. but there's nothing then stopping you from going in and clicking a button to convert that up into a team, or you go into Teams, and when you join or create a team, you can create a team in there, but you can create it from an existing group that you've got.
Right. Yeah, and so that's the number one question I get from people is they have an Outlook distribution list, and they want to use that as the list of people that have permissions as like visitor or member or whatever on our communication hub site. And
Yeah.
you can't connect those.
You can't,
is my understanding.
Distribution groups, they just belong to
that.
Exchange, really. Yeah. In fact, just get rid of them.
Right.
If you need to have obviously a thing that acts as a distribution list so that people can email to it and it's in the global address book, I would create a security group. But when I create that security group, I tick a box to say this is a mail-enabled security group. And that means you get both things. You get a security group that you can use in SharePoint permissions, and you can use the security group to do group policies and, you know, decide what your browser favorites are, what's the homepage for your browser. That's all login policies and group policies. And of course, it also then acts kind of as a distribution list. So for me, I would never create a pure distribution list. I think they're next to useless compared to mail-enabled security groups. But the challenge now.
A couple of things that are called then. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that the challenge now is not comparing distribution lists, distribution groups to security groups, mail-enabled security groups. It's now also comparing security groups to these kind of Office 365 groups, the unified groups that then potentially can become teams. Where should you create those groupings? Do you create them in your local Active Directory and let them sync up? Or do you just make them in the cloud in the first place? And if you're going to create a group, if you're going to create a group called all staff, or if you're going to create a group called senior leaders or marketing, should you just create them as a security group, which is a cool thing, but it's only going to let you do permissions and things? Or while you're at it, might you as well just make a team for that? And then you've got everything in there. You've got the ability to use the group behind that team for SharePoint permissions. And you can also do all the team stuff in there, like share documents and have conversations with each other. So these groups here that I've created, these teams, you could equally have created a mail-enabled security group called Maryland Sales. I'd probably leave off the word team there, but, you know, Maryland sales people. And you could use that as a distribution list, and you could use it for SharePoint permissions. But then the chances are that at some point, those folks would get together. They go, this Teams thing's cool, isn't it? I think we need a team. Should we get a team? And then what's happened is you've now got a team called Maryland Sales Team. And you've also got a mail-enabled security group called Maryland Sales People. And they've got the same people in. And somebody has then got the job of managing both of those instead of one unified group. That's what Microsoft used to call Office 365 groups originally, was unified groups. And that's the idea, is that you take this group of people, you put them in this group, and because they're in that group, they get lots and lots of different things. They get a mailbox that they can receive emails at. They get a SharePoint site. They get, you know, potentially a team, and they can have conversations. They might get a planner thrown into that as well with buckets in it. They might get a Yammer group associated with it. There might be a group in Stream that they can use to upload videos. It's one group to rule them all, really. So I think the way things are going to go, Jenna, is I think in 5 years' time, there'll be no more distribution groups because they're useless. There'll be a fair number of mail-enabled security groups still, and I think there'll be an increasing number of Office 365 groups. And if you're going to make an Office 365 group, you might as well paint it purple and call it a team.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of have our hybrid where we've got that hub as a communication site. And then within our region, we have a bunch of teams under there that are managing the permissions, but maybe only like a quarter of our original Outlook distribution list has a team. And the rest of them are like, we don't need that, blah, 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 or they're just resistant for whatever reason. And so like, our regional manager like wants an Outlook, they want a distribution list for everybody in the region.
Mhm.
And we also need then everybody in the region on the hub site, but we can't use the Outlook DL to manage our hub site permissions. So I'm like, okay, how do I make those two like one thing?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like the security enabled, mail enabled permission group thing it is what I actually need to do to at least make that work now. And I had somebody else created me what they called an Azure Active Directory group. So is that basically the security enabled group?
That's just a security group. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make one now. Look, go into groups.
Well, and I don't have admin access to anything, so I just have to know what to ask my IT with the right words so they create the right thing.
So Jenna, I put in the chat the article from Microsoft that defines those groups for like.
Nice.
We had to go through the same thing. I had to explain to the Exchange administrators why the difference was, why their distro lists weren't going to work, but they, this whatever.
Yeah.
And this helped.
Okay.
And there is a way in the admin center, somewhere in the docs.microsoft.com, it'll probably tell you from here, to upscale your distro group lists. You can use the admin center to upscale them to mail-enabled security groups or up Microsoft 365 or whatever. The admin center will do that for you or for your IT department, because the Exchange guy who was looking at the 50,000 distro lists is like, my admin center keeps yelling at me to upscale these things, and I'm sick of telling it no. Like, oh my God, never mind.
Why would you not? I think from what you were saying, Jenna, some of these folks aren't ready to have a team yet, and that's fine. They don't need to. But I think you could almost, get in cahoots with your IT folks. You could convert the distribution lists into mail-enabled security groups, and nobody would know. It would be, a transparent process, because at the end of the day, when people went into their global address lists in Outlook and they tried to find the distribution groups, they'd still be there. The fact that they happen to be mail-enabled security groups, which you could also use for SharePoint permissions, would make no difference to anybody.
Fantastic. I think that's exactly what I need to tell them to do. Thank you.
I hope that goes well.
The main reason why I still have any distribution list is for those external to the organization.
Yeah.
I don't see a reason to have a distribution list for any other reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the external thing, as we start to do business to business, B2B, you've got your tenant, you've got some partners over there, they've got their tenant, and you're starting to invite people from that tenant into your tenant. Even there, you might find there's a bit of leakage, that people are coming aboard as guests, and you can put those guests in groups. Of course, the distribution list that you couldn't do that are people that you're never going to partner with in that sense. It's just a list of people that you need to send to, Christmas card lists, that kind of thing.
And that often works better as a context list in SharePoint.
Yeah.
They've really done a lot with the groups, and it really does a lot. And I just wish I could get them to listen for a minute. But literally the same guy who said that he's just keeping the 50,000 distro list and that's all they're migrating was also like, this SharePoint thing is really cool and all these teams are really cool. Wouldn't it be great if the system maybe somehow created them itself? And I'm like, yeah, it's called Microsoft 365 groups, but you're not making them.
The guys on the back end who manage Active Directory have enough work that I really don't want them to try to manage a group that's smaller than 50 people. So I really, I don't advocate for any security groups, mail-enabled security groups, AD groups, that are small. If I need something that's only like for 3 people, that's a SharePoint permission group, if I'm doing something like that. Otherwise, I can manage my own groups and teams and whatnot, and leave AD for division level type stuff where people in process the organization and they don't ever move again. But if you're constantly moving between groups and stuff, it gets so ugly in Active Directory. People will be on distribution lists and Active Directory security groups months after they've left an organization.
Yeah.
And it's disturbing.
Yeah, there's kind of a shortage of systems to provision that, isn't it? I mean, we do a lot of work in education, and part of what we do and part of what some of our partners do is provisioning stuff in Active Directory, local Active Directory, and the cloud based on line of business data. Of course, in that case, it's school information systems, so it's a very well defined and understood data model. It's pupils, teachers, students, so it's actually quite easy to do because you pull that from these standard systems and then you maintain the objects in your Active Directory based on that. But it's harder in business because you've got so many different roles, different departments, and there's not really a kind of common language or a common set of systems. There's not kind of a standard, this is a human resources system, and these are this is the standard kind of database schema that we have, or if you were to pull this out as XML, this is the schema for what you'd get. So it always becomes a very manual process to do that. I don't know if you guys have discovered anything in the business world that would kind of do that.
Not really.
I think it's just too hard. It's too diverse.
Mm-hmm.
It would be cool though, wouldn't it? I've seen things like Hyperfish. That's a cool thing because it lets you get reports. You can see what's happening in your Active Directory. You can see what values people have in their records and things like that.
I mean, I can't get people to update their information in Delve or this other system that we've got that you have to go through in order to put your picture into the system, and then from there it'll put your picture into your office profile and everything else, right?
Yeah.
I can be in a lot of meetings where there are 20 or 30 people, and it might be me and 2 or 3 others who have their pictures in the little circle. Most of the rest of the people do not.
And yet, when you look at things like Facebook and Twitter,
that profile is completely filled out.
Yeah, everything, everywhere you've been, everything you've ever done, your friends' friends.
Yeah. And they want all kinds of training for every little thing that you bring out. But when was the last time you received training for Facebook, for Twitter, or your bank's website?
Yeah.
And it's not that those things are so much more intuitive. It's they give a damn a little bit more about them.
Yeah, I don't know how we can tap into that and access that. I mean, obviously, the more places you show things. I was having a conversation today. These little things. Yeah, it's got your picture in.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of almost want to stick it on the page, on the home page, and have a web part which we've got that it shows you your profile picture, so that people would then look at
the top right corner where it says DH.
It does.
For whatever reason, you don't have your picture there, and if you scroll down to those 2 other pictures, you didn't have it there either.
No, that's right. I don't. I don't. This is that's an admin account. That's an admin account. That's why. Internally in the company, we got pictures everywhere. It's the usual picture that I've got of me from about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Where I look young.
I always try to use a more flattering picture myself.
You can see it here. I intentionally use the one where I'm holding up the Teams logo. Not only here, but also at work, because I'm trying to get people to be like, if you have a question about this thing, please ask. Please ask. Stop.
Because I'm the guy. Do you use the people search in SharePoint for things like that? You know, so if you wanna know about Teams, I'm not going to find anything here, but you know, you look for Teams, and then when you look at the results, you look at the people search. We got a web part for the people search as well, and that would then take you basically to people's Delve profiles, and if you then go into your profile and tag the fact that you're good at Teams, or you like SharePoint, or you know, you like amortizing loans or whatever, then
I absolutely would if they had done anything else other than just turn on Teams.
Yeah.
Everything else is shut down. For the first 2 months, we were using Teams, and they didn't even have OneDrive on.
Yeah,
right.
because everything in the Office suite is getting a different accreditation schedule. Some things are turned off that you would just kind of expect to be working, and that included Delve. So we finally got that working a little while back, but until it was approved, all kinds of little quirks were happening because it could not read back to Delve. And
Yeah,
it's being blocked.
It's the Office
So,
graph.
Yeah.
You turn Delve off, you turn graph off,
Exactly.
and all kinds of little web parts don't work anymore.
Exactly. So, but now that we have Delve working, you know, I can go in there and I can say, you know, ask me about knowledge management, ask me about SharePoint, ask me about this, that, and the other thing. But because most other people don't ever add these things, you know, I am the only person in a 50 or 55,000 person organization who knows anything about knowledge management.
Yeah.
And I'm one of like 3 people who know anything about SharePoint. And 2 of those people, I think they don't really know about SharePoint that much.
That's, you know, the site I work on.
Yeah.
And yeah. People are like, what happened to my site collection that I'm working on? Is it was given to a web developer from the 90s who spent a year and a half breaking the SharePoint so he could shove in his 1990s web pages.
Oh, I know
So,
I know the site that you're working on. You'll love this, Darren. The site that he's working on, the guy had created like 400 and some odd permission groups for like 300 and some people. And in so doing, it was to create the permission level as part of the permission group's name. So there was, you know, ABC readers, ABC contributors, whatever. And it was so goddamn just wrong. Like,
well, he shoved, you know, do you remember back when we put the gray bars on either side of a page so that it would look good on a cell phone?
Yeah.
Because cell phones weren't Apple yet. He did that to my beautiful. He did that to my baby. Anyway, it's hurting. It's broken.
not very reactive.
It's
to the
not
form
very
factor
good,
of the
but
device.
it's my baby now. Anyway, yes. So, but anyway, and all I think about is SharePoint is that it's web pages, and they fill it with folders and all that. But yeah.
Unless someone else has a question pertinent to what Darren has given us today, I'd like to start to wrap it up real quick, and that way I can stop recording the session. Does anyone else have anything to add or ask Darren real quick?
There are a couple of questions in the chat. What is best practices to follow to use out-of-the-box team templates and custom templates?
Okay, so I'm not sure it's a great idea using too many templates, because very often if you use a template to make something, you then spend a lot of time undoing bits of that template to make it do exactly what you want. For me, training is more important. So if you can make a brand new team from scratch, and this is just plain, I made these manually. We normally automate everything, but I just threw this together manually. It's a team. Within a couple of seconds, I'd added, the channels I wanted. I'd made a private channel. I'd gone in here. I'd added a couple of tabs connecting to stuff. You can add connectors. If you're going to be working on a team for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours with a number of people, I think you should kind of work out what you want and then make it do exactly what you need, rather than using sort of pre-built templates that have, this, and then a channel called this, and then that channel's got other special things. I don't know. I mean, what do other people think? Is there a kind of standard template that kind of floats your boat and you think this is perfect, I'm using it for all my teams, or does it make more sense to kind of start with the pizza base and then choose your own toppings?
I'm always about choosing my own toppings. I hate whenever anyone else has the ego to assume that he or she knows my workflow enough to say I need this, that, and the other thing, whenever I almost 100% of the time do not.
Yeah, it just takes me back to the old SharePoint save as template stuff, which I was very guilty of making. I was that guy. I know what you need. I know what you all need, and making a template that then would get rolled out to 40 different departments for their SharePoint sites, and then probably spending loads and loads and loads of time working with those to kind of undo those templates and take bits out and rename things and change things. There are advantages to it, I'm sure. I think if you're doing something that is very specific, for example, if you're creating a team for a project. So most of the teams we've got here, these are all kind of role-based or department-based. You're making a team for that department. The needs of each department are going to be slightly different, especially in an organization where you've got marketing departments, you've got sales departments, payroll departments, finance departments. They're all going to have different requirements. But I think if you're in the business of spinning up a lot of short-lived project teams, and those project teams are all going to have certain things in them, certain channels and certain extra tabs in those channels, but that team's only going to exist for 2 weeks, maybe a month, while that project's happening, and then it gets archived. I think that is probably quite a good reason to get one of those right, and then kind of use it as a template for other teams that you make. So project-based teams, which are relatively short-lived, and you're going to have a lot of them turning over and being archived. I think that's a good reason to use a template. But any department teams, I wouldn't, because I think it's worth that department taking time to plan what they need and grow it organically. Does that answer your question in any way?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Just we want to make sure that we are going to limit the channels, So users not to use only the private channels. They can create as much as, but they don't want to create the team channels, sub channels like that. So that's the templates you use for the easy governing,
I see. So you'd have a template that has exactly the right channels for that purpose that can be repeated. And then when you manage the team, you make sure members can't. So it's only the owners that can create channels by unticking some of these boxes. Because owners can always do everything anyway, right? There's no way of preventing that.
But if the Microsoft updates the out-of-the-box channels, and what is going to be impact on those customized templates? Do you really come across? When you do any consulting with that?
So we work a lot in education, so that's very much the case there, is that we have things called class teams, and they're very specific because they've got a special tab for a special kind of notebook that works in the classroom. And they've got a special tab called assignments that is used for sending work out for the kids to do. And those can't be changed. Nobody can change those. Even with your best PowerShell, you can't change those because that's part of the template. And that makes sense in that context because it's a really different vertical. But in a business situation, I can't see the argument for creating a template that limits you, that constrains you in what you can add or remove.
Okay.
That does remind me of something, Darren, that I wanted you to talk about before we do stop recording, and that is, can you tell us a little bit about Cloud Box?
Us, yes, we're Cloud Design Box. Thank you. I wasn't expecting. I was trying really hard not to do any advertising. Cloud Design Box. We work with businesses and with education. We've got some very large customers in the business world and some smaller customers as well. We make sure we do things for both of those. Essentially, we build intranets using SharePoint and Teams. This one I've built today. I didn't use any kind of magic tooling with that because we've got lots of kind of things that we can use in Azure to create sites and things. So that's not in there at all. But actually, if I show you the kind of things we normally do, they're much prettier, much more compelling, because we've got things like this mega menu in place. That is kind of it's a nicer way we think of doing things rather than the website. And then we've got lots of kind of custom web parts that we write as well. So, things like just a word of the day, very, very simple. We've got image slideshow web parts and various bits and pieces. And there's one web part I'd like to show you. If I take this to one of our schools, doesn't matter, I just want to show you the web part. And it's this is the CDB training web part, the Cloud Design Box training web part. It's available for free on GitHub, so you can just download it. Obviously there's lots in there for education, but actually if you switch that to business, then you get to see our user adoption podcast about business. That's basically me and Tony, the director, having conversations with people in the business world about how they're doing engagement and things. So feel free to use that. If you want to have a link to that, it's basically just on GitHub. So I can.
How do you link those videos to this web part? Like, is it some sort of administration back?
Yeah, so the videos are in YouTube, so you can just go and help yourself to them in YouTube anyway. There's no cost for them. And then the web parts, they're written in SPFX. And again, actually, if you
use our own videos, or is it?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Can we use our own videos? Like, can we link to our own videos or own content, or is it?
This is a closed web part that just points to our videos. It points to our channel on YouTube. But if you look us up on GitHub, actually, I believe there's an example of an SPFX web part in there that you can write yourself, and the code is there, and you could write your own version of this and point it to your YouTube channel and do those things. So I'm quite happy to send you a link to that on GitHub.
And there's on the Modern, there's also like just a YouTube web part, and video you can just put in. You can just put in a video. So I've done that for some of my content help pages where I'll have text up at the top and then a video on how to do it down the bottom. And it's incredibly easy.
Yeah, they want to limit, because everyone's working from home right now, they want to limit the amount of bandwidth that everyone is using. So they banned us from watching YouTube while on the VPN. So
you have to connect to a VPN. Here's a question. where is your SharePoint? Is it on premises or is it up in the cloud?
It's still 365 on government cloud,
Okay.
and we have a 2016 instance that some folks are using.
Right.
So
yeah, because I was going to say you don't need to be on the VPN for that. Go on the VPN if you need to RDP to stuff and that kind of thing. But if you just want to enjoy SharePoint, just do it. Go straight.
Well,
because
I've been making a lot of my own video content and sticking it up on the stream or right into a library and letting people watch it from there, or into OneDrive for business. I'll throw them in there because it seems to be like the best place to stream from at the moment until certain other approvals come through.
I'm with you. So we would strongly recommend just using SharePoint sites. So I haven't got a video to show you now, but if you upload a video into here, that video will stream. It will do the whole kind of Netflix buffering thing. It will play in that way. And also the other advantage is you can just treat it like a document. You can name it, you can tag it, you can search for it and you'll find it. You can get a link to it and all kinds of things. So I think
whenever you go to do that embedded thing, you have a lot of different options so that you can make it something that they can download, so that you can make it something that they can resize and everything. The only thing I don't think I've seen that I really need because of some of my clients, staff, is closed captioning. And trying to get closed captions for all the videos that I've created has been hell.
Yeah,
I've had to use my personal Office 365 account so that I can do transcription in Microsoft Word, and then I'm creating my own SRTs.
So have you uploaded those into Stream? Not to keep them into Stream.
No,
but
I can't do Stream yet because it's not approved. So I haven't uploaded anything into Stream yet. There are like two people who can do that, and so they're like, I don't know, 5 videos out there of people, looking at themselves.
So there's some good news coming. Stream is going to keep all its videos in SharePoint. They're moving to that because it's stored in some weird Azure blob place at the moment, but it's going to be moved to SharePoint, and I think the integration is going to be much better. So rather than having to, specifically upload something into Stream so you get the transcriptions, I think you'll be able to just keep it in SharePoint, upload it into SharePoint, and then kind of call on the transcription service from there. That's my understanding of it. It's very early days in terms of that announcement, but I think it will be something of that nature, that you can just keep stuff in your OneDrive, keep stuff in SharePoint, keep stuff in Teams, but then as you upload that video, you'll have the option to kind of go off and fetch the transcription from a service.
Yes, the transcriptions, part of the move for the new Stream is the transcriptions are going to be much more available, not in that crazy little stream box that they're in right now.
Yeah.
And the closed captioning is going to be better, and that's all coming with the move to SharePoint.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be really cool. I like Stream. I like it for channels. I think Stream, just in terms of permissions, I just found it too hard. It's too complicated. You add this group and that group and that person, you turn this off, and I just couldn't get my head around it.
Yeah.
But that will be fixed because basically it will leverage the permissions of the SharePoint site or the OneDrive or the team, and then you'll just get all the kind of streaminess as a benefit of it. I think it'll be great.
Yes, I think they worked out all the stuff in the Azure blob, like you said, to handle the good stuff, the transcription, the closed captioning, the video editing, and they're pushing it back to and now they're just pushing the storage back to SharePoint so you can do all the SharePoint stuff with it. So that's the new Stream looks pretty good.
So good.
Not to necessarily cut you off, Darren, but I see that it's 1:27 in the morning where you are.
Yep.
And I don't want to abuse you any further by making you stay awake. I really appreciate what you have done for us tonight, and I believe that everyone else appreciates that as well. I am going to send you a link to the recording after it's done, and that way you can use it if you'd like. But I'd like to turn off recording at this time.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Scott. Lovely.